We are live with the Bureau Veritas Navigating the New Normal webinar, which will start in just a minute. We'll introduce our panelists here before we get started. We'll give everybody another minute or so to join us. Now, I'll click off of this presentation here in a minute. So we have several hundred folks joining us from all around the country, and excited to try to stump these gentlemen with some questions about the future. All right, let's rock and roll. It's 12 o'clock here in Maryland. I am at Bureau Veritas, our Building Assessments and Project Management Division, our headquarters, and would love to get started. Very much appreciate all of your time. I know that even though most of us work from home, schedules are still very busy, and there's a lot of requests for your time. So we very much appreciate you taking the time to spend it with us. We are going to try hard to make this insightful, useful, and meaningful for you. We have a very impressive group of individuals that are going to be speaking to us. My name is Nestor Benavides. I have the great honor of being a CEO of our Building Assessments and Project Management Group for Bureau Veritas. Bureau Veritas is all about shaping a world of trust in the world of testing, inspections, and certification. In short, we help people that own or manage properties, facilities, stores, make and execute great decisions on those properties. Without further ado, let me introduce our panel. First, we have Mr. Tommy Ryan, who is Senior Director of Building Services, responsible for all maintenance, repair, replacement of all non-merchandising assets for Home Depot, a store you guys all know, 2,200 stores plus in the United States, Canada, and Mexico, managing over 400,000 teammates. They have been partners with us for over 17 years. So thank you, Tommy, for joining us. We have Mr. Josh Worley, who is Business Initiatives Manager for the Retail Specialty Office. It means he's responsible for implementing special offices like Wells Fargo Home Mortgage, Wells Fargo Advisors, the private bank. Wells Fargo has over 8,000 branches in the U.S., is a global institution in over 35 countries, and they've been partners with us for over 13 years. Thank you, Josh, for joining us. We also have Mr. Matthew Mangold, Matt Mangold, who's Division VP for multi-site programs and construction. Means he manages all construction, retail, and non-retail for Walgreens, multi-site rollouts, logistics related to goods that are not for resale. He's also in charge of capital planning. Walgreens, which you all know, relevant both in terms of retail as well as the healthcare sector, over 9,000 stores in the U.S., and been a partner of ours for nearly 10 years. So really, as we try to figure out where are we heading, right? What's the new normal? The definition I found for normal is conforming to a standard, usual, typical, or expected. And very little about what we're seeing today is usual, typical, or expected. I find that the best way to define what we don't know is to get opinions and get a lot of opinions so that we can figure out where it's going. And these gentlemen here today have represent a significant number of stores and market in the U.S. And so very much value their perspective and their time. So without further ado, let's just jump into questions. In terms of logistics, we do have more questions than time, so we may be skipping over some questions as we go. We invite you to ask questions through the chat and the message functionality. So please throw in any questions, follow on, or questions that you'd like to see these gentlemen answer. We're going to try to keep it moving. So we'll do this a little bit more fast paced, and we're going to try a little bit different format here as we get into it later down the pike. So first, let's start by going around the table. Gentlemen, let's start with Tommy. How are you expecting the world to be different? You know, what is your term of the new normal? What does it mean to you?
Well, I would say I don't yet know what the new normal is even going to look like. I think we're still in a transition phase, and I fully expect it to be very different in the future than it was in the past. For me personally, I like to point out to a couple of people I've talked to in the last week is prior to mid-March, I would probably interact with my direct reports. I have 7 direct reports. I might interact with them once every other day, or even less frequently. But being remote, I'm able to actually meaningfully interact with all of them on a daily basis. So I do expect that that's going to continue into the future. I plan to make that a part of the future for myself.
Awesome. I am going to apologize. In my introductions, I missed the very important Mr. Scott Cervenak from Raising Cane's. So let's go to Scott next. Scott is Vice President of Construction. His team includes property development, entitlements and permitting, construction and construction supply chain. Raising Cane's is a fast-growing restaurant, over 500 restaurants in the U.S. with some presence in the Middle East and absolutely amazing food. So you should try Raising Cane's. Scott, I'm sorry, you're next. What's the new normal to you?
I appreciate that, Nestor. So I would agree with Tommy that we are going through a bunch of unknowns right now, and we'll probably continue to do that. I think if you had to define it, it would be flexibility. It would be caring for, our customers, and we call them crew, our employees first, and doing all the things that are necessary in both the near and medium term to account for that. And that's a lot. But that's really the most important thing right now, is ensuring to our consumers, our customers out there, comfort, safety, surety. That's what people are looking for right now. And the same thing applies to all of our employees, our crew members out there who are working so hard. It's how do we help them? And to me, that's kind of the summary of what the new normal looks like in the very near term, until we kind of sort out some of these bigger picture issues.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. Mr. Matt from Walgreens.
Yes, sir. Thanks again for asking me to join today. I echo all the comments I've heard so far. I would add that, I'm used to traveling probably 3 to 4 days a week, either to our corporate office or to work sites, vendors, and so forth. We don't have that luxury right now. So really trying to keep the team engaged, my internal team engaged with regard to staying on task and working towards our future goals, and our vendor partners, keeping them engaged and letting them know that we're confident about the future and working towards it.
Very good. Mr. Josh from Wells Fargo.
Thank you, Nestor. And like the other gentleman said, we're of the same kind of mindset. We have several different goals. Top priority is obviously the safety of our team members and the safety of our customers. And we're in a little bit of a triage element right now, trying to make sure that that's all taken care of. At the same time, we have a responsibility to continue to work with our partners and our different vendors that we have, and our support our clients. So there's an element to getting back to business, so to speak, from a retail construction perspective, but we do have that overarching element of we need to be safety first.
Got it. So, and I get that these are some of these questions are tough, and I think it's a blend of both what's the new normal with respect to the economy, with respect to business, and there's also, I like to say it's about people. Everything is, and there's the human component that's ultimately going to drive all of this. So to that end, and before we get to the next question, folks, if you haven't used Zoom very much, if you go to the top right corner of your screen, you can click on Gallery View so that you can see all 5 of us at the same time, and that might be a little bit easier way to experience this webinar. Top right, Gallery View. So second question about people, right? So at the end of the day, everything we're doing is about the consumers. How do you and your customers, how do you gentlemen see your customers' expectations changing, evolving through this period? Who'd like to go first?
I can take a shot at it, Nestor. We expect, and as most of these folks have instituted the social distancing elements within the stores. So the logos on the floor to identify the 6-foot separation, the shields, and those kind of things. And then we also expect our customers to continue to want to ramp up their online shopping, and so our delivery of products to them either at the store or via mail and so forth, it will be a big part of what we expect. And I think there's going to be a natural hesitation on the part of the public with regard to coming into the store. So doing whatever we can to make sure they understand that we are doing everything possible to make sure the environment is safe and you know, clean and so forth.
Awesome. So accelerating social distancing concerns, online shopping, and reinstilling confidence.
Yep.
That. Josh, why don't you go next?
Yeah, much of our focus has been around providing sanitation, you know, cleaning supplies. We've done a lot with the sneeze shield, you know, lots of plexiglass going throughout our facilities, as I'm sure the rest of the retail world is seeing. So that's been, you know, the ultimate I guess, steps that we've taken here. We've set up distribution facilities throughout the area to get products out to our team members, both in our administrative space, but also our you know, customer facing space. So a lot of that work has been where our focus has been, like I said, over this past 6 weeks that we've been working through this.
Understood. All right. So very short term, very much around the concerns about social distancing and the sneeze guards. I'll ask you guys, especially as we go to the next two gentlemen, you know, think of the new normal. There's obviously the immediate new normal, and then there's also the longer term new normal. What are your thoughts, Tommy, about, you know, how are customers' expectations likely to change through this?
I think when we start to ease some of the distancing restrictions and some of the things that Matt and Josh talked about, and it's, you know, not having the sneeze guards everywhere, the logos on the floor. I think our customer behavior around online fulfillment, and whether that be delivery or curbside pickup, I think those expectations are going to be somewhat permanent. It may not be at the level that we're seeing today, but I do think the customers have now over 8 weeks gotten accustomed to being able to roll up to a store, not have to get out of their vehicle, or to have the product delivered to their home. And I think that's going to be a permanent change. It's just a matter of how much it goes back down from current levels, but I don't think we'll ever see it at what it was 8 weeks ago or prior to that.
Got it. So, yeah, and I think that speaks also to the pace of the customer experience when they come into the stores. And lastly, Mr. Scott Cervenak from Raising Cane's.
Yeah, I think it's all well said points. You know, obviously we're a drive-through business with a dining room, and right now our dining rooms are closed, but our drive-throughs are open. And when this all started, we had to, you know, really be aggressive in letting the public know that we are open, we're ready to serve our communities, we're out there. So part of the story here for all of us is centered around all these things that we're doing. We need to remind consumers that we are addressing these concerns and letting them know in so many different channels that we're going to do everything that we can to keep our employees and our consumers, our customers safe. But to that end, back to their points, again, being a drive-through business, we have to really focus, and we've been very fortunate because our crew is so good at improving that. Our drive-throughs are really rocking and rolling right now, and that's a great thing. So we've been able to pivot and use other muscles to account for still sustaining a wonderful business model. And I think all of these three other gentlemen have done the same thing in their businesses, is just adapting to that, what the consumer wants in the very short term here. And I would agree with Tommy, those habits are probably longer lasting. You know, the expectations for consumers over time here are probably going to be more aligned with speed, efficiency, and some kind of touchless, if it's possible, combination of things to get the services that they're looking for. I see those as being longer term issues, and frankly, a lot of that is pre-COVID as well. We've all been working towards those things over time anyway. COVID has kind of accelerated that and made it more important.
Awesome. Very good. So those are the broader thoughts about how customers' behaviors are going to evolve. Let's get a little bit more specific as we plan. And I'll ask a question of Matt and Josh. Josh, go first. As we start to plan, what are your key priorities that you're working on as the world starts to come back into the market?
Well, like I said earlier, you know, safety is obviously our number one priority. You know, I think a lot of the states, I know the state that I live in North Carolina, is expecting you know, an announcement here in the next couple of days of releasing the stay-at-home or shelter-in-place order. So with that comes a lot of different challenges, right? And we need to be prepared for that. And so we're trying to look at the long-term impact of having more people back in our stores or branches. With that, you know, we're looking at different automation. Where do we see opportunities? You know, as simple as doorknobs. You know, will we use doorknobs the same way that we did, you know, over the past year? So those kind of things. You know, paying attention to the statutory measures. Obviously, we're a nationwide, worldwide company, and we have different rules and regulations that are going to come up, whether it be with actually the ability to work today, but in the future, the density measures. You know, how many people can be occupying a certain space. So we have people looking into that, working with those committees as they're coming into terms with that, and really keeping up to date with those things are key priorities for us going forward, because it's going to be so specific, I believe, within, as you move from different states or different areas, that we need to be very diligent in knowing what we can do and what we can't do, and you know, trying to make sure that we're compliant with all of that at the same time.
Yeah, thank you. Matt, what are your thoughts on that? What are your key priorities?
I think that in some cases it hasn't changed. So we have 9,000 stores spread across the country, and a lot of those were built at a point where now we're seeing the end of useful life of a lot of assets, HVAC, flooring, parking lots, and the rest of it. And so we really have to be really aggressive about that. We're kind of reaching a peak, if you will, with regard to addressing those issues. So we will get on top of that, and we'll be pretty aggressive about those plans over the next few years. I think we'll see more integration as Walgreens thinks about itself as a healthcare destination. We'll see more integration of some of the services that we provide, primary care, lab, and so forth, that we've rolled out in some markets, and we'll continue to do those and accelerate those plans as well. So we're pretty aggressively looking at all options, and excited about that.
Awesome. We are getting a few questions. I'm going to try to roll them in as we go. So please continue to ask them, and we're going to try to get to as many of those as possible. So those are some of the priorities of the plans. Let's go to Scott and Tommy on, so as you roll out your plans, what are some of the biggest challenges to executing your plans? Scott, why don't you go first?
Yeah, I think, Nestor, one of the things that we're going to have to deal with, and I assume that most of the people on this webinar are development related, and that's travel, access. You know, we're building things, developing things, and doing programmatic things all across the country, if not the world. If you can't fly, then what? We still have to grow the company and grow the business. So we're going to have to evaluate, you know, what resource availability do we have to still keep people safe and comfortable. And we're doing that right now. So I think one of the biggest challenges that we've got is on the travel side of the business. What are we going to do to accommodate that need? And it's a challenge. We'll do it. We'll figure it out, but it's going to involve probably using some different muscles than we were normally used to. That's okay. We will plan accordingly, and we'll adjust. But I think travel and access is going to be a big question for us here in the next, call it 3 to 4 months.
Understood. How about you, Tommy?
I would say the biggest challenge for our team right now is the scenario planning that we're still going through. Is before we can get into operational planning, we have to kind of finalize the scenario plan so we can understand, what is phase one, which I think everybody would say they're currently all in phase one of reopening. What is phase two, and what's different in phase two? What's different in phase three? How do you go from phase one to phase two? How do you go from phase two to phase three? Is there a second wave and you have people that are at phase three that go backwards to phase two? And I think laying out all the scenarios and being prepared for all those scenarios before we can start building the operational plans of what occurs at each phase and timing wise is where we're still at, is still trying to finalize all those scenario plans.
And when you say scenario, what's the criteria that defines a scenario?
Oh, how do we respond in each of these environments? So how do we graduate to the phase two of the reopening process? As government and public health agencies are making that determination of reopening the economy, how do we do the same kind of graduated reopening process, and what is different at every phase of that process, and what happens if we have to go backwards because of case count increases or a second wave of the infections.
Understood. Very good. So one of the questions in all of our minds is, how quickly will work return? How much can we expect in the back half of the year as vendors? There's a lot of vendors on the call as well. Let's go to Matt. How aggressive are you going to be attacking the balance of, or are you planning to attack the balance of 2020 relative to what you were originally planning in your plans at the beginning of the year?
I would say in large part, we're going to do everything that we intended to do in fiscal year 20. Our fiscal year ends end of August. So where I had about 5 months to do about 2,500 projects, now I'm going to try and cram it into 3. And so we're doing a little bit of a crawl, walk, run, quickly rolling out sort of our less customer impactful stuff first, and then as we roll into summer, it'll be a little bit more of the more aggressive work in the stores. Like initially it's energy efficiency projects, rooftops and so forth, but then we'll get into patient health rooms, our labs in stores, and other more aggressive projects. So.
Awesome. How about you, Tommy?
I think we're going to probably be a little more measured with how we go through the balance of the year. I think obviously we will resume activity, but I don't know at what pace and what timing that resumption will all occur. I think we're just going to be a very measured approach to the balance of the year.
I suspect we're all going to be evaluating that closely. So let's actually talk a little bit about hygiene, which you guys have mentioned through both safety as well as customers' expectations. How have your plans for hygiene changed specifically? Let's go to how about Scott?
So as we've all said, Nestor, that's obviously a critical component, and we're actively looking at solutions to do everything we can in that position, in that space. So it's evaluating all of the componentry that you would normally associate with cleanliness in restaurants for us, which we already do a great job of. Can we do that even better? And we're always looking for those kinds of opportunities. I think one of the things that we all can perhaps look to at some point is there a way to unify, if you will, around cleanliness standards, in particular pointed at consumers? Is that possible? I don't know. There are a variety of paths out there to take in that regard. But with the advent of the crisis that we're going through right now, do we need to update or augment those strategies to come up with a somewhat unified approach to that? So again, back to customer safety and comfort, that they know when they're entering your facility or engaging you, that they can see, yeah, these folks have it taken care of. I'm good with that. That's probably one of the areas of opportunity that I think we can look at. And frankly, Nestor, you and your organization are probably at the tip of the spear when it comes to those kinds of things. So look, anything that we can do in that respect would be a wonderful add for our company as well as the industry that we're in.
I appreciate those words. How about Josh? And also speak. Are there any certifications that you guys have heard about and are potentially considering? Josh?
Yeah, thanks, Nestor. So, for us, unlike Scott's core business is, serving meals, and obviously the sanitation plays such a high role in that. It was something that came up to us specifically regarding that, and just our hospitality stations in different offices where maybe not our core business, maybe just kind of a fringe benefit of coming into our offices or branches. You get, a coffee, a tea, maybe a pastry or something like that. We're having to rethink all that. It's not something that we've been focused on, but now it's something that it comes into play. So we've looked at redesigning our customer facing areas because of the hygiene component there, potentially self-serve stations, putting in hand washing stations, those kind of things that have never been something that was part of our design. As we go down the list, we have to look at how our restrooms are set up. A lot of times we're in, especially with our brokerage offices, we're in Class A office space that we don't handle the restrooms, and so we're having to look into see what is the rules around that, and what do we need to do something extra because maybe it's not state mandated, but it's something that we want to provide as a company to our clients and to our team members. As far as the certifications, we do, like I said earlier, we are very aware that there's going to be different statutory and local ordinances that will change because of this. When we talk about the new normal, there's an area of fact that will be altered for us. And so at this point, I don't have the information that says there's a different set of standards that we have to adapt to, but we're all anticipating that, and we're all very focused more at the local level, because that seems to be where it is, where it's going to be, and we'll partner with our firms in the different geographies to help us navigate through that process.
Very good. There's a question that was asked in terms of can anyone speak specifically to the environmental conditions specific to air quality within the stores or buildings? Are any of you guys looking at implementing HEPA filtration or any meaningful modifications to your existing HVAC systems, air scrubbers, anything like that?
I'll start. It is on our list of things, and we do a lot anyway around that as part of our standard, especially in our administrative buildings, because we have the mode has always been let's see, let's be more dense, let's create this team space and those kind of things, and now that may be changing a little bit, but that's been something that's been on our radar in the administrative portfolio for a long time, and now even more so in the retail environment.
Anybody else plans for upgrading HVAC systems in any way? No. All right, let's move on then. Let's go to how do you guys, supply chain wise, especially internationally, are you guys affected at all by the supply chain? Are you making any modifications to your process as a result of that? And I'm talking about not consumer purchase products, but things that you use in the construction and project management space. Let's go.
I'll dive in. I'll take that one, Nestor, if you don't mind. I think we've been able to leverage our merchandising supply chain for definitely a lot of our PPE as it relates to providing it for our associates inside of our stores, not just inside our stores, but in all of our facilities, our distribution facilities, our corporate facilities. Even we have badged Home Depot employees that go in and do installs and measures inside of people's homes. So all the PPE, we've been able to leverage our core merchandising supply chain to assist with all that PPE, where traditionally that's not been an area that we've been able to leverage in the past. So a lot of good networking with inside of our company and leveraging of existing processes and existing network for the movement of goods was something we absolutely implemented in the last 8 weeks.
Very good. How about Scott? Any
Yeah,
supply
Nestor,
chain?
from a PPE perspective, we're in a pretty good place there. We've been working on that for some time. Actually, we got a great story that some of our crew have been making masks, which is awesome. That's a really cool thing.
It's a new pastime.
Yeah, and a good one. From a construction and development standpoint, supply chain is a challenge. International freight, cost for freight. I was just reading this morning that, the airline industry obviously right now is suffering greatly. And therefore parcel shipments, which some of them go on airlines, is probably going to be a higher price point soon, if not already. Things that come via ship, in particular, if you have any componentry where you have assemblies, sub-assemblies that are sourced in Asia, that side of the world, we need to look into that. We do expect some gaps here and there in access to materials and equipment, in particular for things that are sourced overseas, just due to challenges in freight. Whether it's high pricing and or lags in time, I think it's going to be bumpy from this point through probably at least the third quarter, if not beyond.
Got it. Thank you, Scott. So jumping around a little bit here, what's the biggest change? Let's go to Josh and Tommy on this one. What's the biggest change you expect to the work side, kind of the corporate side, the working? What do you expect to change in terms of in the office? Scott talked about the difficult with travel. Any specific things you're working on as people start returning to offices? Start with Josh.
Sure. Yeah. Like I said, we're all in the environment where we have multiple retail, stores or branches or whatever they may be across the country, and travel both with our construction managers, with our line of business support. Those kind of things are very important to the rollouts of these kind of things. So navigating around that for the time being is a challenge. I think getting back into that, which we have a little bit, we're traveling by car and doing those things on the local level. We're also relying on our, we talked about supply chain. It's the same with our architect partners, with our engineers, with our GCs. We're having to rely on folks to give us the information when we can't always get to it. So from the travel perspective, like you said, we're trying to work around it, and eventually we'll get back, but it'll probably be a while before we're, Matt, I think you mentioned, you typically travel several days a week. For us, I think, it'll be toned down a little bit for quite a while. As far as the office, goes, like I said earlier, our focus has been around the safety of our team members and our customers. And, we're focused on those customer facing spaces as far as having the tools brought in there. Number one, as far as our office space, folks that right now don't have to work in the office are working from home. And so it's been some challenges around there as we reintroduce that. I think that there's been a lot of talk about how density is going to change. And so we're having to reevaluate how that works. And, maybe there's staggered schedules, maybe there's, there's different workspace environments. That hasn't been the top priority, but it'll come to figure those things out.
Very good. Tommy, any thoughts on that one?
Sure. I actually was listening on a webinar yesterday around that topic of reopening the world's workspaces. And one of the interesting takeaways I had from that was that they believe that before everybody gets to phase 3 of a reopening process, that they estimate conservatively at least a 50% reduction in kind of the density of associates or employees in workspaces. So if you had 10 people working in a certain area of square footage, you should expect that it's no more than 5 people in that same square footage area. So to Josh's point about staggered schedules or other things, is I think the virtual work relationship is going to continue. Some people may be in an office and having to work virtually with people who are still working remotely, but that is going to continue for some period of time.
Got it. So, question from the crowd: what do you do what's your approach? Are you looking at having a set approach when customers aren't willing to take the control seriously, aren't wearing masks in the stores or the facilities, the locations? How are you guys handling people that are not following instructions? Anybody want to volunteer?
Sure, I'll volunteer. I think our asset protection team is a separate organization within the Home Depot, and that's really where they're spending a lot of time is how do we ensure that people are being compliant, and how do we diffuse situations and not allow escalation of frustrations. Talking to one of our leaders in that area last week was how frustrations are leading to escalations in activity, and how they are coaching our associates to de-escalate those situations.
Anybody else, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, much of the same with what Tommy said. You know, we've had several, you know, folks. Our leadership has been really driving home the fact that, you know, you don't know what somebody's going through right now. They could be on polar opposites from they have a loved one with, you know, that has contracted, you know, the coronavirus, to they've been out of work for 6 weeks, and they're, you know, they have different mindsets. And so we're company-wide really trying to be compassionate to that, and just try to go into every situation not knowing exactly what they're going for, but being sympathetic to that, and like Tommy said, de-escalating those environment or those you know, conversations.
Thank you. A couple more questions coming in. Matt, the question was asked, you know, are there specific CapEx projects that you're working on right now or planning as a priority?
Well, it's generally the refresh type work. So anything related to energy efficiency, our parking lots, floors, ceilings, that kind of stuff. That's really what will get going the hardest and the fastest out of this. The other stuff takes a little more time to plan and manage.
Thank you for that. There was a question specifically to some kind of technology. Is anybody using laser scanning or digital twin technologies for remote work planning and coordination? Very specific. Laser scanning and digital twin technologies. And next question. All right, before we move, we're going to move now to the next phase, which is try to go through all of our panels and most of these questions and really kind of get a single thought, kind of one sentence. Let me share my screen before we do that. And I will, kind of following on Scott's comments, Bureau Veritas is known throughout the world for testing, inspection, certification, and we have developed a hygiene certification. We have a partnership with Accor hotels in Europe and with some school systems overseas. And we're aggressively trying to work with our clients and our partners here in the US to figure out how to help them solve those problems. Let me share my screen here. Are we seeing it, Jeff? Awesome. So try a different format. We'll speed it up a little bit. And actually, I'll come back also to some of the questions you guys were asking earlier and throw them in this format. So one idea, one sentence. Let's start with Josh. You know, what do you think people are wrongly assuming about how this is going to evolve, about the new normal?
One sentence. Yeah, I think the narrative that I've heard is it's trying to get through this, and I think we need to understand that we're getting to a new normal, not necessarily getting through an issue.
I like that. Tommy, what are we wrongly assuming about how the world's going to change?
I think that anybody who says they have a really good idea of what it's going to be is wrongly assuming. I don't think anybody has an idea of what it's really going to be.
Fair. Matt?
Yeah, that it's going to be back to what we currently call normal. Just throw that word out. It's going to be something different.
Appreciate that. Scott?
Yeah, I would agree with all that. It's just not static. It's an evolution.
So don't assume certainty. All right, second one is what's the coolest, most innovative idea you've heard about in the last couple of months that's come through this whole thing? Let's start with Scott.
You know, in terms of idea, I would just say in general, I think this applies to what we've heard today, and this is not one sentence, sorry, but the tremendous flexibility in response that businesses and consumers and the public have been able to pivot and adjust and come up with solutions and do their best to get through it. It's pretty inspiring, and across all fronts. It's been really cool, and there's been a lot of really neat things to accomplish, you know, solving some problems. And that's, to me, one of the great outcomes of this whole exercise is just in general, fighting our way through it, being positive, can-do attitude, and let's go solve problems.
Awesome. And for anybody that hasn't done this before, trying to answer in a single sentence is not easy. And that sentence from Scott was, I think I wrote that in high school and I got a run on and I got a bad grade on the Matthew, most innovative idea solution.
Not near as profound. Virtual happy hours.
Virtual happy hours. There you go. And Scott, I wasn't discounting the answer. I think makes the pivot that we've seen in the entire market and for everybody is pretty awesome. Mr. Tommy.
I think I'll go like Matt. I've liked on some of the video conferencing, the ability to have a custom background is one of the innovative things I've seen as well.
I saw somebody was able to put a digital cat on their head that moved with them. That's innovative. Mr. Worley.
I'd say having hand sanitizer showing up from our you know, vodka distilleries and our branches has been the most innovative thing that I've probably seen.
Who would have thought? Who would have thought? All right, going back across. Where do you think technology makes the biggest difference? Let's go, Josh, back down.
Well, you know, we haven't had a big chance to dive fully into this on my side, but the temperature scanners and how that rolls out, I think is going to be a big thing, you know, for us going forward. It's going to be something to watch.
I don't know if she was green. Okay, Tommy.
I think in terms of technology, anything that's voice activated or touchless and enables that and ability to do things without having to touch things is going to be a big opportunity in the technology space.
Definitely. Mr. Matthew.
I would say I think a lot about how I'm going to use technology to reach our team and motivate the team the same way you would in person. I think that's one thing I'm really thinking a lot about.
Stay there, Mr. Scott. Technology makes a big difference.
So, Nestor, we've seen virtual inspections out on job sites from cities, and that's awesome.
That is, we're seeing the same thing, and that's something that's about acceleration, right? We've been talking about that for a long time, and this is actually forcing it to happen. Let's jump a little bit. What's the biggest opportunity that you see from the new normal, Scott?
Yeah, I would just say acceleration. You know, learning through this and collaborating and collecting all of these ideas into one space and leveraging that so that we can get better and improve. There's a lot of opportunity that we've learned in pivoting the business, and we just need to continue on that path.
Indeed, acceleration. Mr. Matt?
You know, our company president said decision making. He's seen us make more decisions faster in a few weeks that might have taken us, you know, months or even years to make because we had to. And he'd really figuring out how do we capture the essence of that and keep it moving and be more agile.
Love that. Tommy?
I'd say adaptability, the ability for people who may have worked on something that they've been working on for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, now being asked to work on something completely different because that's an emerging need. So the adaptability of people is a great opportunity.
I like that. Mr. Josh?
Yeah, you know, we've all heard the term unprecedented times so many times here lately, but typically when you're in those situations, it yields you innovation, and that's what I'm seeing come through right now is just innovative thinking, innovative ideas. So I'm looking forward to seeing how we continue that.
Like it. So let's go and field a couple of questions here. And I promise I didn't stack the deck in any way, but the question was asked, where are you guys sourcing your sneeze guards and your the plastic? Any quick special places?
I responded, Nestor, on the chat with our vendors.
Awesome. Very good. Let's see. Is there anything specific? And we talked about, the touchless stuff and accelerating it, but is there anything else that we haven't covered that you're specifically doing to drive confidence in your customers to come to your locations? Anything besides what we've talked about, or anything specific that's worth sharing?
Sure, I'll jump in here, Nestor. I think the queuing that we've been doing outside of our stores and the customer limitations, I would say I've gone into a lot of other retailers and there is not that queuing process. So I think that has provided some confidence to customers coming into our store. So even the queues, there is a 6 foot distance and markers on the concrete or the asphalt out front of the store of where to stand as you're standing in line in order to access the store, so that we can ensure them when they come into the store that they aren't going to be in a crowded environment.
Awesome. Along those lines a little bit, the question was asked specific, and I'm not sure, Scott, if you can answer this or not, but are you looking at changing your facility design because of the balance of drive-through versus in-store dining?
Yeah, great question. The answer is yes. We're seeing change right in front of us, and we need to adopt to that for sure. The fact of the matter is that everybody on this call is probably getting more mobile and more touchless every day. So how do we deal with that in terms of the balance between dining room interior and drive-through exterior? We're gonna have to look at that and look at that pretty closely. And again, that's another opportunity.
Is anybody else, the question was asked around windows, but is anybody else planning on changing the layouts of either your stores or your offices based on what you expect people will be, how they will be behaving differently?
This is Josh. I'll go. I mean, one of the things that we're, especially in our customer facing space, we're probably going to be expanding that area because in the past we've had a lot of people that would go back in the team area, and so we're gonna have more interaction and have to have more room because you have to plan for if you have multiple people in there, high quantities of people in there at once, you have to have room for it. So there'll be some, again, dependent on the density obligations that we have to meet, there'll be some changes.
Very good. All right. Not sure if this question is meaningfully different than the other one, but any surprises over the last 4 to 6 weeks that haven't been mentioned? Let's start with Scott. Anything that's just surprised you? You talked about pivoting in terms of most innovative.
Yeah, I would just say in general, supply chain, and somebody talked before about sneeze guards and asking a question about those materials. We were able to get them in a matter of days. That's pretty awesome. All things considered, we were able to pivot to that and adjust to that very, getting PPE for our crew members so that they're protected and getting those things very quickly. Super impressed with just supply chain access to those critical items so that we can keep people safe under very unusual circumstances. So we've been very fortunate in that regard to access those items.
Yeah, it has been amazing. Like literally overnight, everybody got some kind of device and figured out how to have a face mask.
They did.
Matt, any big surprise for you, Matt?
Well, not in a good way. The negative one would be the fragile nature of our economic picture, right? So kind of how quickly things have changed. The one fact I heard the other day was really interesting was normally 2.5 million people fly a day, and lately it's been 100,000. So when you think about the ripple effect of that on the airline industry, employees, and so forth, and that just is across the whole network.
It's just the surprise is that this is even possible, right? Like,
Yeah,
this can even
exactly.
happen.
Like just the speed
Like,
at which it happened is.
I didn't know the world had an off button.
Yeah.
Tommy, what's your surprise?
Uh, I agree with all the things said so far. The one additional that I might add is the unpredictable and variable nature of governments across varying levels, so local level to state level to federal level, and how quickly they enact different type of mandates or regulations, and how variable it really is.
Very, very good. Josh?
Well, if you told me 6 weeks ago that we couldn't operate new construction in so many of the states across the board, and I would have had my busiest 6 weeks, I think, in the past several years, I would have been surprised. So I think the amount of different work that has come up, and it's a good thing, you know, it's keeping people busy. It's providing a service, but it's been, like somebody said earlier, it's been different things that we're doing than what we're mainly accustomed to.
Very good. So let's make it even tougher. Let's try to just literally word association, kind of top 3 words that come to mind when we posit the following questions here. You know, what top 3 words come to mind? COVID. Josh?
Polarizing.
Tommy?
Out of left field.
Matt?
Disruptor of worlds.
Indeed. Scott?
Challenge.
A big one. A big one. All right, 3 words or so. What's the most impactful thing that will speed up this recovery? Scott?
It's focused.
Focus? I like that. Matthew?
Getting people back to work.
Tommy?
Reopening schools.
You have a lot of big following behind you on that one. Josh?
Avoiding knee-jerk reactions.
All right, summer 2020. Top by thought. Let's start with Tommy. Mix it up a little bit.
Vacation question mark.
Which room are you going to vacation in this summer? Matt?
I was going to say staycation yard work.
Josh?
Honey-do list.
Good. Scott?
Pedal hard.
Pedal hard. You mean bike-wise or life-wise?
All the above.
All of the above. Biggest concern? Few words. Scott?
Just uncertainty.
Indeed. Matt?
Probably the virus bounce or whatever we're calling the potential reoccurrence.
Second wave.
Second wave, yeah.
Tommy?
Is there going to be a recession?
I think there may already be one. Josh?
Yeah, I think the economic fallout that we haven't quite seen yet.
On everybody's mind. So, you know, the infamous question, you know, when does the world get back to where it was, right? So when do you think, you know, what's the next quarter that gets back to where we were end of 2020, end of 2019 going into 2020? Josh, how long does it take?
To be determined would be my 3 words for that.
Tommy?
We use a term called 20XX, which means an undefined year in the future. So I'll go with 20XX.
20XX. Matt?
Yeah, it's. I agree to be skeptical. More than 18 months.
Mr. Scott?
Yeah, I'm more of an optimist, but I'll go 12 to 18 months.
I think that's what we're hoping for. One thing you regularly do to stay motivated and inspired or pedal as hard as you can, Scott?
Yeah, it's tough to answer in one word, but I will just say staying in touch with our restaurants. You know, they're working so hard. All these people on the call here, they got people that are working really hard. Watching them getting it done, keeping us in business so that we all have jobs. That's pretty awesome.
Amen to that. Matt?
The personal check-ins with my team.
I like the quote someone said, we're in the same storm, but not all in the same boats.
Yeah.
Tommy?
I have, in order to stay motivated for this, been able to have dinner with my family, make a point of at a certain time just stepping away, end up going and having dinner with my family at the kitchen table every night.
Very nice. Very important. Josh?
Yeah, like Matt said, I've increased the number of one-on-ones and the team meetings that we've had just to touch base. It's been helpful, I think.
Awesome. So changing gears, we're coming home here in the last few minutes. Anything you recommend that's great entertainment? Josh?
Ooh, there's a podcast out there. I may butcher the name of it. It's Things You Should Know, I believe. It's just two guys talking about very random things that you would have never understood, but it's on all the podcast channels. I've found it pretty interesting to plug in when you're out for a run or something.
Things you should know. Tommy?
I think I shared with some of you guys last week this show called Carnival Eats on Sunday afternoons on the Food Network.
Carnival Eats. Still on my list. Matt?
I'm loving A Pirate Looks at 50, Jimmy Buffett.
Love that, man. Scotty?
I'm just trying to stay in touch with as many news outlets as I can to just digest, be a sponge, take it all in.
Good for you. All right, this year's NFL Super Bowl. What's your thought? 3 words. Scott?
Wait a second, is this like who's playing in it, or is it going to happen?
Who's winning it? Are we playing it?
I would just say, here's my one word, please.
I like it. All right, please for the NFL. Matt?
Yeah, hopefully we're playing and the Colts are in it.
Tommy?
Record TV ratings.
There you go. Optimism. Josh?
Yes, we're playing it, and I'm going with the Bills and the Vikings to play in it.
All right. Sounds like a good year. So what I'm going to do in the spirit of time is give you guys each a chance to share some final thoughts. And in it, if you would include just the thought about, is there a single immediate priority that's on your mind as you depart, and any wishes you have for our audience today. Let's start with Scott, who I apologize again for forgetting to introduce you there at the beginning.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's been great. Just focusing on the balance of this year, and we're a very can-do organization, so we expect to execute and produce and deliver, and we're excited about that. 2 other quick thoughts. One would be what's going to happen to the office market, particularly in urban areas. I think that's a huge question mark, and I would expect there to be changes there. And then the last thing would be, what are people going to do that live in urban markets? Is that going to change? If you have to rely on public transportation or an elevator in your daily life, will that change how people think about where they live? And those could be significantly long-term impacts to all of us.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And thank you for being with us. Matt, immediate priority?
Yeah, I would say, be calm. There's a lot of news. There's a lot of scary stuff you hear on a daily basis. We're a very resilient country. We saw that after 9/11. We will come out of this stronger than we did before. And the other thing I would say is use the time. So you can't do much else. So figure out what makes you happy, work out, be with your family, whatever it is.
Amen. Thank you, Matt. Thank you for being with us. Tommy?
I'll just try to get through the next day, the next week, and the next month, and just have a positive attitude and hope everybody just stays safe.
Thank you, Tommy. Thanks for being with us. Josh?
I think my main 3 things are, we need to show empathy because we don't know what people are going through right now. We can't assume. Like I've said several times today, that safety is paramount right now, and to operate based on fact, and not knowing is a fact. You know, you make precautions based on not knowing, and that's okay. We'll operate, you know, as we get more information and continue to do so.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh. Well, gentlemen, I was a little nervous getting going, but it was a lot of fun. I do have the great honor of being the head of this awesome group of people here at Bureau Veritas, Building Assessments and Project Management. And one of the best things is really our client base, right? It's not just some of the biggest and best organizations and corporations in the world, but it's also really, really good people. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate everybody's time today. Hopefully it was entertaining and informative. You know, I'll leave you with a quote: "Nothing ever goes back to normal. All that happens is your concept of normal changes." Right. So let's take advantage of this opportunity to change it in a way that's positive for ourselves, our families, our businesses, and then hopefully the world. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us at BV. We'll see you guys again.
Thank you.
Gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.